Um, I would I would like to make some announcements before we start the program itself. But let me introduce myself first. I'm Azra Talat Said, and the Secretary General for the International League of People's Struggle, which is an anti-imperialist organization with nearly 400 members operating across the globe. I will be moderating the webinar today, which, as the name itself suggests, will be analyzing the various prongs of imperialism, whether the economic arm carrying out exploitation of our workers and our peasantry, or plunder of our resources, or through the brutal militarized force through the many wars of aggression which the United States is unleashing on the world. So before we get into the webinar itself, let me inform you that our one of our main speakers, Professor Marandi, has is delayed a bit, and he will be joining as soon as he can. And so there is going to be maybe he will be able to speak after Victor Garces. If not, then he will be moved further down the program. So without further waiting, let me just start. Um, um, this program is being hosted by the International People's Front, and so I would like to call on Rhonda to give a brief introduction to the IPF.
Thank you, Azra. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. The International People's Front is very happy to initiate this webinar. Let me talk a little bit about what the International People's Front, or IPF, is. We are a united front organized against imperialist forces. And as the name implies, its aim is to mobilize organizations, movements, and individuals at all levels, from local to international levels, to coordinate, cooperate, assist, and collectively fight against imperialism and all its agents in all forms. The rise of neocolonization and occupation of our countries, of intensifying fascism, are all reasons for us to urgently create a united front and collective people's movements against these hegemonic imperialist colonial forces. Welcome, and we're very happy to welcome you all here. I'll turn it back over to you, Azra.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Yes, indeed, we are very happy to be here and to be able to engage with some of the foremost activists engaging in the political dialogue across the world at this point. Today, we have at hand Victor Garces, one of the icons of people's movement, not only in Asia and the Pacific, but globally. Victor has been a huge force in creating and developing people's institutions and movements, fighting for national liberations and genuine people's democracy. Currently, Victor serves as the International League of People's Struggle, ILPS, and he is the vice chair internal. Welcome, Victor, and you have about 20 minutes. We hope that you would be able to keep to time. Let me put some questions to you so that we have um, maybe it's easier for you to speak as you have such a broad vision. Victor, the world is going through a tsunami scale of crises, from economic to climate crisis, with food crisis, and with many wars of aggression being ignited by the US imperialism, which is having a devastating impact on our people across the globe. At the same time, we see that there are rising inter-imperialist tensions. So could you please expound on some critical economic and military fronts that are of particular interest to imperialist forces, particularly the United States? And then one more additional question: what possible modes of resistance are needed to be used by the people's movement to thwart the US imperialists and to develop an anti-war peace movement to avert the threat of a looming Third World War? So you have 20 minutes, Victor, and I will put the questions in the Zoom as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Asra. Um, Indeed, this is a very broad topic, but at the same time, I only have, 20 minutes. So let me first frame the discussion broadly before we go to the your questions. First of all, although the urgent alerting issues for the people today is the question of peace against the wars being foisted upon the people by imperialist forces. But we have to look at it in the whole context, why there is war, why there is a threat to the well-being and the lives of people. First of all, it is we face multiple crises that it's economic, environmental crisis, the intensifying political crisis and war. But all of this are founded on the fact that there is a severe economic crisis of monopoly capitalism. This crisis started in 2008, and up to now, imperialism has not recovered from this crisis. Because of the continuing stagnation of imperialism, you have now the further exacerbation of crisis, not only in environment and social crisis, but the political crisis that is created by the rightists, the imperialists, the bourgeoisie against the people. You could say then, therefore, to understand the crisis, you have to look at the four major contradictions facing the world today. One, that there is a contradiction between the proletariat, the people who are being exploited by the bourgeoisie, especially imperialism, meaning monopoly capitalism. That's a fundamental crisis. But the big crisis that is threatening the world today is the crisis of conflicts among the imperialist powers. The conflicts between the US leading the Western allies against Russia, who is asserting itself as an imperialist power, China, which is biding its time, but actually essentially creating the conditions for it to protect itself, but at the same time also to face US and Western imperialism head on. This crisis, the contradiction between the imperialist camps, is creating a condition of a lack of unpeace, a condition of war, a condition that is creating further conflicts that now moves into the intensification of aggression by imperialism against the semi-feudal and semi-colonial countries. The wars, for example, in the Levant, especially the question of Palestine and the rest of the Arab world, is a conflict that is engineered by the U.S. using the Zionist puppets to attack the Arab world. In East Asia, you also have the conflicts by which the U.S. is actually targeting China, but is using the Philippines, using other countries like its puppets governments in South Korea and in Taiwan. A fourth conflict is the fact that at the same time, countries are asserting themselves against imperialism. And so you have imperialism attacking countries, asserting themselves, governments asserting themselves, promoting socialism in different ways in their countries. And I'm referring to the ALBA countries in Latin America. I'm referring to the West African countries who have booted out the French the French allies of the US, but at the same time, the US now is creating different forms of subversion in African states and creating areas of intervention and subversion through Marines and other troops, supposedly to fight Islamists in Africa, but actually subverting the existing governments, both in Saharan Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. So these contradictions, these four major contradictions, are interlinked, but at the same time, we should understand that for today, the main contradiction in the world is the one between the imperialist powers. The shape of the contradiction is such that you find rightist governments increasingly strengthening in different imperialist countries, and also in countries that are in the periphery, which means to say the fascist governments of Zelensky, for example, or the governments of Orban in Hungary. These are rightist governments that are actually now treading the path of neo-fascism. So it's one thing that you have rightist governments, but on the other hand, many of them are being pushed and pushed, not just to take a populist position to delude the people. Populism is a ruse by which they put people to support them in a situation of economic uncertainty, but in reality, they are able to control the states for the interests of attacking the same people, using the migrants as scapegoats. These populist governments, starting with the U.S., the ones in the forces in Italy, in Hungary, but at the same time also emerging, strengthening rightist and populist governments in Germany, Belgium, and others, the Netherlands, for example, are now being pushed into a direction of outright fascist terror in their own states. This kind of situation is being debated in Europe, for example, between the elite liberal democratic governments, such as represented by parties like the Christians, the socialist governments, socialist parties. But on the other hand, there are slowly and surely being eclipsed by the populist, neoconservative, fascist parties. This direction is precisely the result of the intensification of the crisis, the economic crisis. And in the end, it turns into a situation of increasing conflicts, such as the one in Middle East or in Europe, but also it directs itself towards international warmongering, the preparations for war, creating the propaganda in the different media that assumes that war is imminent, war is necessary, and in the end, of course, in practice, in areas like in the Philippines, in East Asia, Japan, South Korea, you have now increasing mobilization and war preparations. We must start from the premise that in the in the situation of intensifying crisis, in a situation of increasing political conflict, the people want revolution. It is in the end, the people need change. And to achieve that change, there has to be justice. In the end, the people want peace. Peace that's premised on the fulfillment of their rights, their democratic rights, and also the to live in societies that are able to assure their well-being. Nations also want liberation. Different nations all over the world, especially those who are downtrodden, semi-colonial, semi-feudal countries, want liberation from the scourge of imperialism. Even in Europe, nations also want liberation because monopoly capital in Europe is constantly uh, pressuring different societies, communities, even in Europe, and they want also liberation. Many countries want independence. They want to live according to their ideals of freedom, ideals of democracy, ideals of their well being. And this is the reason why many countries, especially the semi feudal, semi colonial countries, many of them have waged all sorts of revolutions. And as a result, you have countries like Nicaragua, Venezuela, governments like such as in Niger or in Mali, Burkina Faso. These are countries that want their independence, their full independence, but imperialism is subjecting them into all sorts of sanctions in order to keep them under subjugation. The foundation of the issues are the economic demands of the working people, meaning also not just the workers, but also the demands of the peasants and the rural folk who have no access or control over productive resources. And more than that, even their lands, their forests, their waters are being taken away by transnational corporations and the states who collude with them to make sure that the monopoly bourgeoisie profit from the resources and the labor of people. There is also the economic and democratic demands of the community to achieve full social, cultural, political freedoms and well-being. For us now, the question of the emergence of arenas of conflict are have become the locus of on one hand the locus of attack by imperialism, but on the other hand it becomes now a focus for people to mobilize, to create resistance, points of unity among governments, parties, social movements, the people's organizations, and the people in general need to support each other to achieve their demands for peace, for justice, democracy, and freedom. For us, you have a situation in the Middle East where there is a Zionist push on Iran. Iran is being targeted by the US since 2 decades ago as the one end of the so called axis of evil. Iran itself has been able to defend itself, to support other movements. Iran itself is subject to demands from the people. But at the same time, Iran is also subject to sanctions by imperialism, and therefore the people and the government of Iran has to defend itself. Now, there is a Zionist push to attack Iran because Iran has been supporting other liberation movements of Arab nations. On the other hand, in the Asia Pacific, you have two fronts. One is the front, the Korean Peninsula, where the subject of attack is North Korea, and eventually, of course, behind it, Russia and China. On the southern flank, you have the South China Sea issue, where the Philippines is being used to be as a, as jumping board, and probably itself becomes, an arena for a proxy war against China. All of this, and even the government of the Philippines, the government of the US clearly present China as the target, but at the same time, of course, the need to unite the different possible forces for a showdown on China. The US has been saying that in the end, it's really China that is their target. It's not Russia. The process, as expressed by Vice President Vance, is that essentially um, there can be a point of agreement to end the war in Ukraine, because in the end, it's also difficult for the US and the imperialists to fight two wars. One in Ukraine, but on the other hand, their main attention is preparing for war for China. On the other hand, the third focus on to attack Iran is given to the responsibility. The responsibility is given on the Zionists as it slowly attacks the different Arab countries and the people in the region. To focus their attention in China, they still have the US and the Western imperialist alliance still has to develop an effective security alliance, an alliance for war. Before, there was a disconnect in the context of the Quad as an economic alliance that includes the US, Japan, India, and Australia. But India didn't want to join or to turn Quad into a military alliance. That is the reason why the US created the AUKUS, the Australia, UK, US alliance, a military alliance. But now India has accepted the Quad can become a security alliance. If the Quad turns itself into a military alliance, it opens the way now on creating an Indo-Pacific alliance against China, where an important player is India, and it brings together the important players, meaning to say Japan, Australia, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Thailand, again with India against the US. By then, an Indo Pacific security alliance like NATO can be created. It's a matter of time that it will be created. And it is very interesting that all these countries, most of these countries, have negotiated a mutual defense pact with the Philippines, meaning to say that all of these countries like Japan, France, are now creating, South Korea, are creating the legal basis by which they can send troops permanently to fight a war in Philippine soil. That gives us the reason to be for worry that the Philippines is not simply having being used as a base for attacks towards Japan, sorry, the US. There are now 20 military bases in the Philippines of the US. But on the other hand, the fact that there are uh, truth, MLSAs, military agreements with other governments besides the US, and backed by a mutual defense pact, means that all of these countries can now easily come to the Philippines in the guise of ensuring the defense of the Philippines against China. That is very interesting because indeed China has not created any military actions in the Philippines, though the China has been trying to assert itself in Philippine waters, in the overlap between the nine dash line of defense versus the Philippine territorial waters and claims. That becomes a basis for a possible military engagement. This is something that the US wants to push, but on the other hand, China has also been careful uh, in initiating any acts that can be considered an invasion. So we have a soft war now, like pushing, they're using water cannons and so on, similar to the soft war happening between India and China across the border, where they were throwing sticks and stones at each other. Hopefully, it remains a soft war. The people don't need war. The people should create a front against imperialism. But to do that, they have to strengthen their fight against fascism. Because fascism is the starting point towards rallying the forces for imperialist offensives against the people internally and in other countries. That is the link. And it's very important then for us to fight the emergence of fascist governments, neo fascist governments, or acts of tax, repression against the people in all governments whom we face, all the bourgeois governments that we face, and in the end, prevent them to go into the propaganda, the hysteria of war that is being foisted by imperialism in all countries. I believe that on one hand, it's important for all organizations to address the question of fascism and the question of warmongering and demand peace. We should also ensure that our demands of peace are premised on the rights, the democratic rights of the people for just peace in the end. But it's also important to ensure that we have effective propaganda, effective the use of all media, all opportunities to call for peace, but also to clarify that when we say that we need peace, it is addressed to the problems, to the issues of fascism, the targeting of the people, the warmongering by imperialism, which are all actually just a ruse in ensuring that their profits continue in the context of crisis. To fight the crisis, though, to end the crisis, we need revolution. Because the crisis are the conditions by which the imperialists and the status quo wants to ensure that their profits, their exalted positions are able to continue. But on the other hand, these conditions are also the same conditions that pushes everyone to war. And therefore, to achieve peace, we must fight fascism, we must fight imperialism, and achieve democracy and justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. That was brilliant. And it really gave us a clear picture on what are the people's demands and also what the principal demands for peace. I mean, it's not a status quo peace we are asking for, but peace in the context of ending the massacres, the fascist massacres, which can also be through just propaganda. And we heard you very clearly on this. We are still waiting for Professor Marandi, who is not here as yet. So what I would like to suggest is that we invite our reactors to um, to come in and maybe give some of their thoughts in context to what the Vice Chair for ILPS, Victor Garces, has provided. So may I invite, first of all, Oscar Patino, who is a Colombian teacher, a social activist, and a member of the National Direction of the Movement for the Defense of People's Rights. We look forward to our interventions, and if people have questions for Victor, we would like them to send them to the chat or write them for yourself, and we will be taking questions a bit later. So the floor is yours, Oscar. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Azra, and well, my dear friends. I have made my list in here, Cody, Donna, and Ronda, and of course, Professor Victor Garces. Here from Colombia, we agree. We agree on the analysis that has been given by Professor Garces, because the main contradiction in this moment is, of course, the clash between imperialism. And this is very important because it gives us the possibility to understand not only what is happening, but about. Do you listen to me? Are you listening to me?
We can hear
Hello,
you.
we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, so reacting to this marvelous presentation, because we agree, I want to talk about tariff war and what it represents in between this imperialist clash. We here in Colombia were thinking about a second Donald Trump, who directly opened again the weaponry race, the war, etc. But in the development of the presidential campaign, we noticed that his interest shows a new form of imperialism. We were with Biden, that we characterize as globalizer imperialist, right? And we enter in this period of a protectionist imperialism, which is a tremendous change. I mean, in the configuration of the U.S. society, because Trump enters to protect, quotation marks, his society. This is very important in the tariff war, because his most important weapons in this moment are tariffs, right? He has attacked directly South Africa for being part of the denounced in the International Justice Court. He has directly attacked all the BRICS countries with 100% tariffs. In Mexico, what happened here in Colombia with our president, I mean, not face to face, but from X, right? Messaging them, right? And when they say, okay, tariff, 25% tariff, 50% tariff more for Colombian products, etc., etc., etc. So in this moment, we consider that we have to pay attention on that, right? Because it's another scenario of the war in which China and all the BRICS countries and other international powers, such as Brazil in this moment. Brazil here in the region is very important. You know that is the first letter of the BRICS acronym, and for us that's very important, right? Like to add a little bit from what Professor Garces said. Of course, Ukraine war is an element to analyze for revolutionaries, and it's very important because for us, what is happening now is the opening of a new world order in which Trump clearly shows that he doesn't believe in multilateral organizations. He has reduced the state, has reduced the international cooperation, and he is developing all the neoliberal model, but to the point that of reducing totally the state and the state responsibility with the people. And in this moment for us, right, we know, I know that we have here some friends from the US, but for us, and taking into account what Chair Garces said about migrants, it's a very time bomb in the middle of the US society. 60 million Latin American migrants. And, you know, an Asian, I don't know, 10 million. So, in a rate of growth, which probably will make America, not America, it's not America, it's United States, will make the United States a country with a 30% or even a 50% migrant population, right? And I connect this with fascism, where Trump is saying that he, for example, is going to take all white South Africans to the States because he wants to state these white United States, etc. Right? So the connection between the trade of war, the tariff war, and fascism is opening a scenario where, of course, revolutionaries have a role, a very important role, in which the work, political, social, educational work with migrants that have shown that they are very organized. For example, in the States with these 5 strikes, one day without migrants, in which they can, for example, totally, almost totally stop what has to do with commerce, market, etc. It's very important for us. This is very important, and because, for example, Trump took advantage of all these migrants preventions with the same migrants, right? So you have Mexican people living in the States for 20 years, 30 years saying, okay, I don't want those horrible migrants that are coming from the south border, right? So it's a very important fact because in the revolutionary situation, we consider that the United States in this moment are in a revolutionary situation. Migrants have played like a very important role. About the international scenario, well, we are looking carefully at that Indo-Pacific alliance. We are not sure. We are not sure about the development of the contradiction between Russia, China, and the United States. We are sure that Trump wants to recover the country from a very, very, very long decade, very, very long decade in time, and China and Russia are trying to become like the alternative for the people. And I want to finish my reaction with this. This is very problematic, right? Because in this moment uh, we we disagree with the point of view of some progressive movements and leaders, etc., that are saying that BRICS are the alternative. I mean, being subjected to other imperialism is not the solution for the claims of liberation, independence, sovereignty of the countries. But we have to make like a much more open and respectful war for sovereignty, autonomy, independence. Well, this is all right. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. So, revolutionary hearts from Colombia, and thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Oscar. Thank you very much also for your intervention and making the clear links also between what is happening to the migrant population in Colombia and Latin America in general, and then also those very fascist actions being taken by the US are actually also seeds of revolution. Actually, they are much more than seeds of revolution at this point, because it's not only the migrants who are suffering, the suffering of the people across the globe is now uh, just just unbelievable. So thank you so much for your intervention. May I now call on Oscar, who's here, and if he could make his intervention. Ozan Demir is from Atik, and he's part of the Confederation of Workers from Turkey in Europe. Oscar, are you there? I don't.
Ozan, you can unmute yourself, please. And I believe you're able to unmute on your own.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so Yeah, now it's okay. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
hear you. Do you want to open your video?
Yes, okay. So, hi again. Can I talk only without video?
Yeah. Yes, you can. If you can't open your video, that's fine. Please go ahead.
So my English is not so well. I want to try to situation in Turkey. Tell about it.
I don't think anybody will understand Turkish.
No,
So,
I will not speak in Turkish.
Mhm.
I will speak in English. So, but my
Okay.
English is
Not to worry. Go ahead. We will try.
okay. So the latest happening what in Turkey is like the fascist Erdogan regime, AKP, and the MHP. This is the ultra-fascist party, this coalition partner of the Erdogan. And they had started a couple of weeks ago say in the parliament that they will to solve the Kurdish problem and they want to do it in peace. So they had the leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan. He was all not allowed to talk with his lawyers or his family. They had allowed to talk with him, and the first reaction of Abdullah Öcalan was that he was ready to work for peace, and that he will announce at 15 February about the situation. So there was a group of Dem Party. Dem Party is the Kurdish party in Turkey. So they have go visited him. But in this time, also, this is part one, and the second part is that they say they want to solve the problem, and they want to unite Greater Turkey. So they have to solve the Kurdish problem. But at that time, they're still attacking the Turkish of the Kurdish mayors. So then the last 2-3 days they have appoint trustees to the municipalities and arrested the selected Kurdish mayors. This is so they have two faces. They want peace and they're attacking also. And then there is another conflict going on with Erdogan regime and the Kemalist capital groups. They have also arrested two mayors in the cities of in Istanbul, and they want to arrest also the mayor of the Istanbul. So CHP, this is the Kemalist Republican People's Party. This is supported by the Kemalist Capital Group, and this two capital groups we call the Yeşil Sermaye. This is the green capital that has been supported by the Islamic and Arab capital group. And you have TÜSİAD, and this is the capital group of the Kemalist, fascist Kemalist capital group. So the conflict is going a little bit higher last weeks because Erdogan wants to secure his presidency because I think in 2 years there will be new selection for the presidency, and so he wants to secure his presidency again. Normally, in the law of the Turkish state, is not allowed to select again as the president, but he's trying to everything. So he has also need the support of the Kurdish party to get this as in the law in the parliament. This is what is happening in Turkey. This is also has also to do with this the situation in Syria, because with new developments there with Hateshe and other Islamic and radical groups now on the power after Assad is going. So the conflict is there about the Rojava. They are still talking about what will be what will be happening in Rojava. They will be joining the new government, or they will be have his own parliament inside the Syria, like in Iraq, the Kurdistan region. So, and we think that the Kurdish movement is also discussing this with the Turkey. They are pushing Turkey also to let Rojava as the same as the Iraq Kurdistan. So they want to have their own parliament, but inside the Syria. And that conflict is still not solved, because also Rojava is supported by United States of America and Israel. So normally when we look at the situation now there, they want to have that Turkish or the Kurdish movement has his own region in Syria, but that conflict is not accepted by the Turkish government. So this is still going on, and then economically, Turkey is going worse every day. There is in all fabrics and all states are strikes with the workers, and Erdogan regime is getting more aggressive. And they are today, yesterday, every day they are capturing people, mostly how do you call it? I forgot the name. People who is working on the magazines or in the TV. The last time there is owner of one TV is also captured and sent to the prison. So the aggression of the AKP fascism is going very hard last couple of days. What can I tell here? Yes, and this is also one thing. Turkey is country who is affiliated with imperialism. So, and they are trying to fulfill their duties for imperialist countries in the Middle East. So, example, after Trump has talked about the Ukraine situation, today Zelensky went to Turkey to talk with the Erdogan regime. So, Turkey is a country that will be used by the imperialist countries and to do his work for them. But Turkey is also thinking about his own, what can I take from this cake? Because the conflicts between imperialist countries is getting very high every day. So they're also preparing their self for how they can use this conflicts between the imperialist countries. So we are normally they will announce the thoughts of Öcalan about the situation in 15 February, but about this is delayed. We don't know why. They have not told anything. I think the conflict that now the AKP regime has attacked all the mayors and in Kurdistan. So it will take time, I think. But you have also the PKK commanders has announced that they will they will not lay down their weapons and they will be fighting. Yeah, this is a little bit the latest situation in Turkey.
Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
John. Thank you so much. And your English is actually pretty good.
Thank you.
We were unaware that Zelensky was in at least I was unaware that Zelensky was in Turkey today, and that it just shows how much the imperialists and their client states and their puppets are running around at this point. Everybody has been kind of put in a very uncertain political position. And it's interesting that in the chat, it was also mentioned that a very strong ally of the United States, Canada, is now kind of, loggerheads. They are at loggerheads with each other. And we can see similar developments in Europe happening. So thank you very much for your intervention.
You're
You did
welcome.
talk about the Arabs, but Erdogan has also been a very close ally of the Zionist forces. So I just wanted to add that as well. So I will now go to the next speaker, and that is Annie. Annie Lestaria is the chair of the International Migrant Alliance. It's a global alliance of migrant workers. So Oscar's comments were very pertinent to what is happening to migrants, especially in Latin America, but in many places of the world. The floor is yours, Annie. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Azra. Let me just thank the previous speakers for already mentioning the position of migration today and how the place of migrant workers within this current conflicts. So first, in the International Migrants Alliance, we reaffirm our position that even without COVID and political conflict, the war today, the type of migration we have was already a forced migration. So even before the COVID, the record of the number of the migrants already reached to 280 million people around the world, and more than 70 million refugees, asylum seeker, and other displaced people internationally. So if you combine the number, it's already proving that the development, the global development or the globalization that they are promising today is really a failure. Some people are benefiting, but majority of us are being displaced from our home countries because of the impoverishment, because of the land grabbing, because of the unemployment, because of the environmental destruction and political conflict and so forth. So that is already recognized even by the United Nations itself. Now, during COVID, we witnessed how many governments are actually weaponizing the pandemic to attack migrants, the people around the world, but particularly migrant workers, by using the COVID to justify their anti-migrant, anti-refugee actions. But we thought that post-COVID, somehow it would be better. At least it will change to a better condition. But post-COVID, in our observation, in our reports from the members from around the world, already proved that the governments and the corporation continue to attack the migrants and refugee rights throughout. So, and the current development, especially since last year up to now, it has been intensified and multiplied in terms of how they treat the migrant workers. So some of the significant momentum is really the war and the political conflict that really affects directly the migrant workers, the refugee around the world. But the election of or the re-election of Donald Trump really, it become a culmination of the whole attack against migrant and refugee. Some of the global trend that we notice now, since Donald Trump platform to win the election is really to attack the migrant and refugee. After he was inaugurated, the first thing that he did really to arrest massively and deport migrants in huge number, Donald Trump already declared that he wants actually to deport 11 million undocumented migrants from the US. And he did what he said by at least arresting at least every day 500 to 800 undocumented migrants. And he does it in a way that is very barbar, very open. There is no shame in that. There is no concern of the human right. There is no even slight consideration the contribution of these migrants to the development of the USA today. So that's one. But also beyond that, this type of attacks is not isolated cases. Even during and post-COVID, the attacks against migrant and refugee has been intensified in Europe, in US, in Canada, and around the world. So one of the significant attacks also against refugee, which is to stop receiving asylum seeker, while they are also encouraging the settled refugee to leave. Some even given some money or commission just to leave the country voluntarily, but some also being forced to leave whenever they commit any little crime in whatever situation they are threatened to be deported. And in addition to that, COVID and post-COVID, the erosion of rights against migrants has been really intensified, and violation against the rights of migrants is really normalized. For example, within Asia, in countries where day off was very normal in the past, now they use the government and employer is using the COVID to actually deny holiday or day off. Now it's become normalized for the employers not to give day off even after COVID is gone. And now somehow this kind of violation is being normalized, and government really do not do anything. Even when the migrant try to report, it means to nothing. And beyond that also, there is really harsh restriction in terms of mobility, even among professional migrants. So the crackdown, aside of open arrest, is also, and then also the border. But in addition to that, is also imposing very restrictive requirement for them to process or renew their visa or their employment contract. This has been really practiced in most countries where migrants are being made to be very difficult just to renew their contract. And if they commit, for example, in Asia, if they lose the job once or twice, all the more they will be denied to enter certain countries for a while. So this is in terms of host countries. So globally, what we are very concerned, now the attack against migrants is very open. It become normal, and then seems the United Nations even said nothing at all on this issue. While, at this point up to next year, there will be a global review, or there is a review on the Global Compact on migrants. So it's quite contradictory in terms of how the treatment against migrants and the silence of the body that should protect migrants is happening right now. On the other side, we are also witnessing in the countries where where the migrants or refugees come from. In Asia, for example, there is intensification of labor export program. At least in countries like Philippines, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, they continue promoting labor migration in the promise that it will benefit the migrants, our well-being and migrants, and it will help development of our home countries and as well as receiving countries. The truth is, actually, many of these countries are really unable to cope with the increasing number of unemployment, especially among the educated and professional. And at the same time, there is really a big dependency on the revenue from the money that migrants remit back home. In Nepal, the GDP from the migrants is already 30% of the total national GDP. In Indonesia, it's already giving like 10% of the total GDP, like more or the more in the Philippines. So there is a dependency of countries sending countries to the remittances. And yet, despite the war, the threat of the pandemic again, and all this political crisis, government continue to promote labor migration. And they use many schemes, whether they are, whether they are a professional or not professional, they are using many schemes just to encourage people to leave the country. And at the same time, many of the host government also cut off their budget to the well-being of the migrant workers. So this become a big issue for the migrants, because whenever we try to seek assistance from our embassies, our consulate, their answer is no money, no services. So find your own solution. In addition to that, the last thing I want to say, there is also development of in many of the host countries. We just attend one meeting, very important meeting in Asia, which is the regional review on the global compact on migration. And it is very sad to hear that many governments like Japan, New Zealand, or Taiwan, Hong Kong continue to say that they are actually developing new scheme to bring in more highly professional migrants because they are now facing demographic crisis. There are less people to be employed in the next 10, 20 years, but they need more people to continue their development project. So they will be imported to bring in, especially in the care work, as a nurses or as a caregiver and domestic worker, also in the manufacture, plantation, construction, IT, and other emerging industries. So you will see that migration will not stop, regardless in whatever situation, because for many of these countries, migration is just a tool for whatever industry they want to develop. So with the development of the AI, we can imagine that the future migrants means people with high IT skill, and at the same time, they will not be treated as highly paid worker. They will still be temporary and even docile labor. And last, there is also intensified crackdown against organizing and the movement of migrant and refugee. Now the leaders of the migrants are being targeted intensively. They are being prevented to renew their contract. They have so many interrogation by the immigration, and their social media and mobilities are also being monitored. So this has been really the picture, at least briefly, on how migration looks like, at least from last year to this year. IMA noticed that in every 2 or 3 years, the shifting of migration and the treatment of the migrant has been really radically changed. And that's why we are really monitoring and work closely within our membership and with our network to really know the trend and also develop a strategy in organizing. So our organizing is also adapting to this new reality, but we feel quite hopeful because there are more support now from the local community, from the community of home countries who are more concerned now to the well-being and welfare and the treatment against migrant and refugee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie, for that very elaborate and very sharp context of what is happening to the migrants. And yes, the picture that you drew right now was very grim and difficult, I think, for everybody in our parts of the world where poverty and hunger and displacement is going on a very large scale. And this is, I think, what Victor was also talking about, that what we really need is not just a movement for an anti-fascist, anti-imperialist, stopping them, but actually a revolution. And nothing now can really stop the imperialists except the people's war and people's revolution to take them down. So thank you so much. We really, really needed that input from you. I would like to now go to Cody Urban, who is also a member of the Global Secretariat for the Resist US-led War Movement. The Resist US-led War Movement is a global network of organizations fighting to end the US-led wars of aggression and militarism in all forms, and to fight for just and lasting peace. So the floor is open, Cody.
Thank you so much, Azra. Greetings to everyone. Thank you for coming to this really amazing event. I don't want to speak too long, and I really appreciate all of the points raised by the previous speakers here, especially as regarding the situation in the US right now, what comrades Oscar and Eni were saying about the many attacks on migrants that are happening the world over. Of course, in the US, this is a major point of attack of the neo-fascist Trump regime trying to consolidate its power. We see migrants being completely scapegoated, attacked here within the US and also super exploited as migrant workers, but also the form of attacks of the mass deportation campaigns, sending them back to the countries which they were forced to flee specifically because of the crisis of US imperialism in those countries. But what does this mean for the people, the other people within the US, the other working people? It means that the Trump regime is using migrants as a scapegoat to try and divide the working people so they don't see who the true enemy is. Those really behind the crisis of the economy, the political crisis happening, and all the other crises that Victor mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. We're seeing Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, at the head of the X social media platform, at the head of SpaceX and many other industries he's trying to make. His so-called Department of Government Efficiency is stripping away healthcare for people. It is completely removing checks and balances of the authoritarian government in power. It is doing whatever it can to take away the social services that people have relied on for so many years. It is doing this just to increase its profits, but also because the crisis is so dire that the US knows it is declining. It has stripped away all of the past democratic pretenses of the Biden and Harris regime and is totally going all out and preparing for war. So in the little bit of time that I have left, I think it would just be very important to point out that the people of the US, we don't have anything in common with the Trump regime. Neither do we have anything in common with the past Biden and Harris regime. The people of the US would benefit completely from the overthrow of US imperialism. We have much more in common with the people who have spoken on this webinar before me, from the many people's organizations who are represented here. And if we are going to truly find liberation for all oppressed people within the US, as well as the end of economic exploitation, then that revolutionary solution and building that broad anti-imperialist, anti-fascist united front that we've been talking about here, that is the way that people in the US will truly find peace and justice. So with that, thank you, everyone. All of us in the belly of the beast look forward to joining in solidarity with all of your movements for liberation. All power to the people.
Thank you so much, Cody. Yes, revolutionary greetings from the US itself. And of course, the Trump administration is creating havoc, not only across the world, but inside for the US, the people of the United States. And the progressive forces are standing up and gearing up to fight that regime as well. And not only this regime, but because it makes no difference which regime comes into the US. One after the other, they prove to be more ferocious than the previous one. So the next person we have is a comrade from Kenya, and he is Booker Omole. I hope I said that name right, comrade. Booker is the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Kenya, the Communist Party Marxist of Kenya. And so it's my great pleasure to ask you to make your intervention.
I'm sorry, Azra. Booker is having some difficulty logging in right now. So we may have to ask him to speak in a few minutes.
Okay, very well. That's fine. Let's wait for him to make his intervention in a bit. At this point, since Professor Marandi has as yet not come and logged in, maybe we can start taking some of the questions and asking Victor to respond. Would that be good for you, Victor? Can we do that now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So they are in the chat, but let me also read a couple of them to you, and maybe you can just take those, and then maybe from there we can go on. So there is a question from a group in the United Kingdom, which says, can you please comment? It's Chandrima. She says, can you please comment in a bit more detail about the links between Hindutva fascism, the attacks on the Adivasis, and the Maoist movement in
Yes, the Hindutva, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, um, is, of course, we know that there is a proto-fascist party behind it. That is the one that is really pushing the BJP. And they have created a fascist framework that has taken control over India. They have set aside, the the puppet governments. Sorry, the parties of the comprador landlord class parties like Congress Party. And what has replaced is really a movement that has created a comprehensive fascist terror in India. Such terror has merged with the Indian armed forces that has already been there fighting the on one hand the Maoists, the Naxalites, so called, but at the same time also attacking the Adavasis and the low caste people. All of this actually is an attack on the proletariat and the semi proletariat. The low caste, the Adivasi, the tribals, and are being mobilized by the Maoist Party, the Communist Party of India, for a revolution to overthrow the imperialist control on the puppet states of the compradors and landlords in India. I think it is important for us to support the struggle of the people of India. And that is an overarching struggle that is not just limited to the Maoists, but also all democratic forces in India, the mass movements such as the NAPM, the other organizations that are associated with other communist parties in India who are also fighting the Hindutva fascist movement. I think on one hand, there is a lot of how do you call this? Regrouping, I suppose. But on the other hand, there is also a rapid fascistization in the Indian bureaucracy. And that has been engineered through the BJP and the fascist movement behind it. I forgot the acronym now. Sorry, SRS, SIS. Yeah, but it's important for us to understand that there's a fascist movement behind the BJP, and that this is the one that has been rapidly creating a fascist Hindutva movement that is attacking all democratic forces in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor, for your response. So there are a number of other questions, and maybe I'll ask a question from Oscar from Colombia. He says, for Comrade Victor, what is your opinion on the term techno-feudalism? related with the accumulation through technology, media, whereas we, the people, are just like servants or consumers in this environment.
I would say, of course, indeed, that the the technology capitalists are acting like rentiers. And that's why I think the term feudalism comes from, that in the end, you have a select group of oligarchs that control the digital space through the different corporations, and then therefore they are rentiers because in the process they are able to collect the the payments, the resources of people through the online system. Now, for us, I think it's important to understand that the digital electronic revolution has reorganized a lot of production in society, meaning to say, robotics depends on the digital systems that's behind them. Everything in this world, in our existence now, has been taken over by a digital electronic framework that adds on the industrial framework of capitalist society, which is is the main framework of the system of imperialism. Now, imperialism, of course, the monopoly bourgeoisie will use all forms of investments, all forms of developing new processes. And creating those new processes means, on one hand, developing the electronic infrastructure through high-speed computers that is behind all the electronic systems in the world today. On the other hand, the rapid process of digitization, and this rapid development is such that it has now reached the level of artificial intelligence and other forms of digital technology, such as genetics, medicine, and so on. The another important aspect is how the internet and these online moguls are able to control social media and also trade, meaning to say that there's a lot of banking and also exchange of products and services that are mediated through that process. And so therefore, one part would be like the likes of Amazon, by which Amazon is able to use the digital system to change the framework of trade. It is easier for everyone, but also therefore allows Amazon, which is basically, part of, supposedly, the commercial capitalists are supposedly just assisting the industrialists who are able to speed up the rate of turnover of capital. But the problem is actually the likes of Amazon or the likes of Alibaba is such that they're able to scheme more because of their control. Besides also the advantages of operating on a being operating bigger. So in the end, all this, whether it is in the context of the market, such as Amazon, in the context of Facebook, in the context of Microsoft itself, you will find that then the whole framework of the economy, which is now not principally that the economy is electronic, but it supplants the production, the market, services. It is supposedly assisting it, but in the end, these now are able to siphon off the wealth of the people from their wages, their savings, and so on are signed off by these moguls or these billionaires, these monopoly capitalists who are managing one services, managing the electronic systems in society, and therefore, yeah, you can call them digital feudalists. No, I would rather say that we are a section of the rentier capitalists. They're acting like the another side of the financial oligarchy that are siphoning off, similar like the banks and so on. They are actually some of the worst forms of the monopoly capitalists. Yeah, the technical rentier class, technological rentier class, I would say.
Thank you very much, Victor, for that explanation. And yes, much more food for thought for us to think through these terms and what they mean for the people, for the working class. And then the question was very important because it raised the issue of technology and very high scale digital technology in agriculture, which is crippling to the people, and it is creating further lack of work for millions of peasants in the countryside. I would like to acknowledge it's not a complete statement, but it's half from Professor Amir. And maybe Rhonda could address it as she is from the International People's Front. But my suggestion is, Professor Amir, that we reach out to you after the webinar, and then maybe we can work together for a full statement. If you agree with that, then because it cannot be completed here, it does not allow us the time. But if you are happy with that, we will be reaching out to you and working on a statement with you to be placed on the IPF website. Is that good for you? Please let us know. Apart from that, I think there was a question from Ozan, but I think Ozan had to leave. And so I'm not sure if it is worth addressing that question anymore. So maybe we'll just skip that question. What do you think, Victor? Would you like to, in any case, address the question?
What is the question? Sorry.
Okay. So, sorry, I have to, from Ozan, how is the alliance of Turkey and Israel advancing and becoming a treat for the Kurdish liberation movement, now that the Russian army and the US troops are getting out of the region? I'm not sure I make sense of that question.
I think it's about the threat to Kurdish liberation.
So why is it a treat?
Oh, I think threat. I think it was a
I
typo,
see.
perhaps. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed. I don't have the details from the ground. And to a certain degree, I have inferred from some sources that Turkey has been able to attack a lot a lot of ground from the Rojava, and therefore for it to there has to be more support for Rojava because Turkey is gaining some ground because they have really attacked the Kurdish movement, and they know that Rojava, even though it's part of Syria, is an element of threat for them. On the other hand, the fact that Israel or the Zionists are able now to have strong presence in Syria can also be a point of concern for the autonomy and to a certain and the self determination of the Kurds, the Armenian, sorry, the and the other people. Well, I think there are five people who are in Rojava, and therefore they also face that threat. It's important also to see. We don't know, but we should consider how Israel's the Zionist occupation of the Golan Heights and how it now shapes their direction of military attack towards Iran after that. So I'm not. So I can only say so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. There is a question from it was meant for Marandi, but since Marandi is not here, I would the person is happy for anybody to answer that question. So I will read what he has written in the post. So this is Mr. Marcus Stone from UK, and he says, "Thank you for this talk. My question was directed to Mr. Marandi, who is unfortunately not here, but I would be grateful if others could answer to this. I'm Marcus from London, and I am half Iranian. I'm interested in how the Iranian government justifies its claims to be a force of resistance against imperialism while simultaneously exerting its own imperial influence in the region. Given Iran's involvement in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq, how does this align with its anti-imperialist rhetoric? Additionally, how does the government reconcile its supposed stance against Western colonialism while systematically oppressing Kurdish and Baloch communities in Iran? Or how can they imprison and sentence to death women like Bakshan Azizi, Varshe Murdai, and Sharifa Mohammadi, women who have been at the forefront of the workers' and women's struggle in Iran and have consistently denounced Western imperialism?
True. The question is this: we should understand the conflict in the world today. That it is not. It's one thing that is because it is the people who are seeking liberation from imperialism, but at the same time, there's also the conflict of the imperialists among themselves. And that conflict can take the shape of alliances, meaning to say that the U.S. is the hegemon among the Western imperialists, number one. Understand that the imperialist powers like Germany, France, UK are um, allies, secondary in role to the US, but allies nevertheless. And on the other hand, you have a world that is not yet shaping into two camps, but a multipolar world where you have different powers, if you will, which can be imperialist or not, meaning to say that Russia is imperialist in its own right, but it's weakened. China is an imperialist in its own right. And then you'll find countries like India or Iran who are strong historically, demographically, economically, and they are ruled by bourgeois, and also, even in the case of Iran, a combination of bourgeois and clerical, rulers. These countries are not democratic. These countries are not yet imperialists, but they, because that you have a bourgeois, a big bourgeoisie in these countries that also seek to dominate, oppress, and exploit surrounding communities. Whether you look at it for Iran, the same if you look at it in the context of India against Nepal and others, and Sri Lanka, for example. It doesn't mean that these countries have suddenly become, suddenly anti-imperialists. Actually, they are just aligning themselves in the context of an imperialist fight. The US and the Western imperialists are the how do you call this? The rulers in the world. But at the same time, you have others who are aspiring or are imperialists, and they can use other means to portray themselves as oppressed. The BRICS is an alliance that combines strong countries and imperialists. And therefore, the BRICS is not necessarily another imperialist camp. You find that there you have India, which aligns itself with the US. You have Russia, then China, who have some form of alliance. You have South Africa, Brazil, who are not necessarily clear about their alliances. Therefore, you cannot put the BRICS as a camp. But on the other hand, you can also not say that the BRICS is countries who are fighting Western imperialism. They are, how do you call this? They are asserting themselves to a certain degree, but on the other hand, they're not yet a camp. So we cannot look at Iran as an oppressed country, if you will. They are a country who are asserting themselves against US imperialism. And in that sense, they express one conflict. Countries who are assertive against imperialism, but on the other hand, it doesn't mean, therefore, that they're doing it because they are democratic. We have to then understand that the world is not simply black and white, and therefore we should be able to understand that Iran has can express itself, or to, like, for example, the efforts of China and Russia to rally countries against imperialism. In one sense, it is positive because it's a way to fight the main hegemon. But on the other hand, we should be aware that at the same time, Russia, China, Iran have their interests, and it's not necessarily that of the semi-colonies, the oppressed peoples of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. Uh, I think this question is asked many times, especially for us in ILPS also, because we have stood with all anti-imperialist forces. And so there are internal contradictions. It is well recognized. But our biggest contradiction remains the US imperialism, and we need to respond to that. I'm very happy to see that Professor Marandi is with us now. But Professor Marandi, if I may ask you to wait, we have one speaker from Kenya who is going to speak, and right after him, maybe we can ask for your intervention. Sure, thank you so much. So let me once again welcome Comrade Booker Omale, the General Secretary of the Communist Marxist Party of Kenya. I hope this time your Zoom link will work. Welcome, Comrade.
Thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me to give this intervention, particularly in the perspective of the organization that I lead, the Communist Party of Kenya Marxist, where I serve as the General Secretary. And also, we also participate in the International League of People's Struggles through our party mass organizations, particularly our Revolutionary Student Commission, our Women League, and our Youth League. The topic today in regard to West of Asia, it's very interesting. And since we can also not analyze the West of Asia in isolation, we must also try to link it up with other anti-imperialist struggles that particularly in the global South, and more specifically in the African continent. In fact, the Communist Party actually holds that an analysis that particularly the West of Asia could be the weakest point of imperialism, particularly Palestine. I know through this webinar, we are trying to do an analysis because if making a revolution was that easy, then we will not spend so much time trying to do an analysis, because analysis also should be able to guide our actions. But in our understanding of imperialism, I think it's also important that we analyze imperialism and anti-imperialist forces with a view to move the anti-imperialist struggle from one level to the other, particularly to consolidate the anti-imperialist camp. Now, in the West of Asia, where there's been, a total offensive, particularly the United States outpost, which is a Zionist entity, Israel, has actually highlighted the importance of identifying the primary enemy. I know within the left, or even within the anti-imperialist camp, we can differ in how we understand various entities that serve imperialism. But at least one thing that we must be able to agree on is that who is the primary enemy that we need to consolidate and defeat for a new world order to be built. At least from the Communist Party Marxist Kenya, we hold a firm opinion that the United States imperialism is indeed the primary enemy that we must unite to defeat for a new society to be born. When we look at other anti-imperialist forces, particularly in the West of Asia, where we consider Iran as one of the key players in terms of challenging the United States hegemony within the West of Asia, and particularly in support against the settler colonialism in the occupied Palestinian territory, then in that analysis, we see that if we are to defeat the primary enemy, which is the United States imperialism, then to that extent, the Iranian people, the Iranian state, in that regard, is an ally to advance against the fight of United States hegemony in the West of Asia. The other point that I wanted to make clear is that, and I want to reinforce what Comrade Victor has actually said before, that when we look at the BRICS, because the BRICS is a conglomeration of sorts. In fact, they do not have even but one thing we must also appreciate about the BRICS is that BRICS is one of the initiatives that helps to weaken the dominations of the United States or hegemony at a global level. So, but is said to be imperialist, especially in the presence of outright countries that actually serve interest of imperialism, particularly in the global South. So I think it is even important to get into further in terms of how do we reconsolidate the anti-imperialist forces, at least at a global level, especially in the absence of the global vanguard of the working class, because that is the objective reality that revolutionaries are faced with, that we do not have. Actually, our duty as revolutionary actually is to be able to contribute to the building of the global proletariat vanguard, the anti-imperialist, to reconsolidate the anti-imperialist camp. But how can this be undertaken? It's important to actually undertake that solidarity and internationalism is one of the key pillars of our organizations, of our political party, the Communist Party Marxist. So it's important to open bilaterals with different organizations, different anti-imperialist organizations, different workers and communist parties that are organizing in the globe to be able to even initiate, even before fraternal relations, we can be able to build bilateral relations. And when we now reach a situation where we can have a congruent idea among those organizations, then we can open up even a multi-level consultation to be able to reconsolidate the anti-imperialist camp. The other is of course, the imminent threat of the imperialist war that is going to impose upon the entire globe only for a few interests, a few people to advance their own interest. So it's also important also to understand that the anti-war movement that is currently sweeping the planet must also be redirected to perform its anti-imperialist role, because some of the anti-war movements are very pacifists in the sense that they even do not recognize that war is actually the highest level of contradictions in the society. So we will still continue to hold that for us to reconsolidate the anti-imperialist forces, then we must also understand that within the imperialist forces themselves, there are indeed contradictions amongst themselves that we must take advantage of. And even if we can, cause chaos in the imperialist camp and consolidate the anti-imperialist camp, then we are going to be able to advance the struggle in our lifetime from at least one level to the other. Primarily, the Communist Party, Marxist Kenya, would just want to take this opportunity to say that we take internationalism and solidarity work very seriously. We remain firmly in solidarity with Palestine and all the anti-imperialist forces, not just in the west of Asia, but in the globe. We also want to show solidarity even more boldly with the resistant axis that we consider as the liberation movement in the occupied Palestinian. Of course, we may disagree because some people do not see, for example, Hamas or other resistant movement as a national liberation movement. But we take an option to say that from our perspective, from our realities, and from the African National Liberation Movement, we consider the entire resistant axis as a national liberation movement that needs to be supported, not even in advance of socialism, but to advance the national independence of Palestine. As we correctly say that Kenya today, where we do our work, without national independence, without economic independence, without political independence, we cannot say that we can start the most urgent task, which is socialist construction. We first must finish our independence. And of course, there's no high wall between our independence and the socialist construction, and move steadfastly to start the socialist construction while exchanging experiences with all the anti-imperialist forces, workers, and communist organizations to advance the struggle of the global proletariat movement. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you very much, comrade. Absolutely. What you have said, our struggles inside our countries, and then our solidarities with all of those who are fighting for national liberation are the most critical part of the work that we do here in ILPS and all fronts. With that, I would really like to now welcome Professor Marandi. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Marandi, who is an academic attached to the University of Tehran. He is an author to various publications and was the media advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiation team during 2013-2015. Professor Marandi is well known for his political analysis, speaking on global political situations, particularly on happenings in West Asia and the axis of resistance. So, Professor, welcome, and the floor is yours. You would have like maybe 15 to 20 minutes. The people here have been here for 2 hours already, but we are very happy that you were able to join.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'll try to keep it short to allow people to have some rest. I'm sure that the speakers before me had a lot more to say, and therefore there's really nothing left for me to add. What I would like to point out is that we've reached a stage of maturity among the resistance forces in the global south, which I believe was non-existent to this degree before, where all of the different anti-imperialist forces are joining hands, or at least for the most part, they're joining hands to defeat imperialism. And we know that the empire has had a very long tradition of divide and rule. And through that policy, they've succeeded for decades in weakening our movements across the board. But for the last few decades, we've seen, for example, how the Islamic Republic of Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Yemen, and other forces, Hezbollah in Lebanon, all of them have been on the same page. And despite attempts by imperial powers and their local allies to divide the people and divide the movements from one another in order to weaken each and every one of them and ultimately bring them down, we've only seen further consolidation. Venezuela assisted Iran in its time of need, and Iran assisted Venezuela in its time of need. When Venezuela was being attacked by the United States, prevented from exporting its oil, and when the country's electrical grid was down, General Soleimani traveled there and took a large group of experts from Iran to assist our allies in Venezuela to overcome this imperialist attempt to bring down the country. If this was a few decades ago, the forces of division may have succeeded in keeping the anti-imperialist front, the broader resistance, apart. Today, we see that the axis of resistance in West Asia, which has made huge sacrifices, inside Palestine, of course, but in Lebanon, we saw how Hezbollah sacrificed its youth and its people to protect another people, not to defend their land, but to defend a people who are victims of a genocide, victims of a Holocaust. That is probably the most extraordinary sacrifice that one can make, where one voluntarily moves to defend someone else and recognizes that the price that they will pay is extraordinarily high, especially in a country like Lebanon, where the West has many agents and many forces that constantly stab the organization in the back. The same is true with Ansarullah in Yemen. Yemen has been at the forefront of resistance, implementing the Genocide Convention in the Red Sea, preventing the Israeli regime from being able to continue its slaughter as best as it could. And despite constant bombings by the United States and others, the UK, they continued to shut down the Red Sea to put pressure on the Israeli regime. The same is true with the resistance in Iraq, and of course, Iran, which supports and funds the entire axis of resistance, whether in Gaza or Lebanon or Yemen or Iraq. The burden is heavy, but the responsibility is shared. Today, we see that a broader resistance, bigger than the axis of resistance, is being formed. A resistance across the globe that includes people inside the United States that are supporting the Palestinian cause. And this is an opportunity for us. This is a great opportunity to be able to move closer to one another and to put greater pressure on the empire, whether it's through sanctions by state actors, whether it's through activists promoting boycotts, which we should continue across the board in each and every country, boycotting Western goods, Western products, and choosing alternatives, boycotting anything that has to do with the empire benefits the resistance. This resistance today is global. You see it in South Korea, you see it in South Africa, you see it in Latin America, as well as in Central Asia. And most importantly, you see it in Europe and the United States. I do not want to exaggerate and say that the empire's days are numbered, but the empire today is the weakest that it's ever been in living memory. The axis of resistance has had setbacks. Many young people and families were murdered in Gaza throughout the Holocaust. In Lebanon, the genocidal attacks killed thousands. And of course, the United States and its regional allies succeeded in bringing Al-Qaeda to power in Syria. But the axis of resistance had many achievements. The biggest one being the fact that the Israeli regime failed to take southern Lebanon, it failed to take Gaza, it failed to silence Yemen, it failed to stop Iran supporting the axis of resistance, but most importantly, it caused a global awakening from people from different ideological persuasions, and it brought us all closer to one another. Let us continue to work together and to build more bridges and to put more pressure as best we can as individuals, as communities, as nations, and hopefully in the not so distant future, we will achieve the results that we desire. Today, the Israeli regime is still in power, but the Israeli regime has been delegitimized in the eyes of the global community. Young people who knew nothing about the Palestinian cause today know what the Nakba was. Today, they understand what genocide is. They understand what ethnic cleansing and what apartheid is. A global movement that reminds us of the global movement that supported the people of South Africa and Southern Africa has been formed, but today it is even stronger than back then. And it has its roots in the communities are much stronger. And we have a responsibility to build stronger relations and to allow and to help the resistance grow, whether it's the axis of resistance or whether it's the broader resistance. And I'm sure that each and every one of you will do your best to go down that road and to help ultimately free the Palestinian people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Marandi. And yes, we, the people of the world, have an immense responsibility. And I'm very happy that you said that it is a shared responsibility for us. It is. And we are actually very keen to take on this responsibility. The people of the world have shown very clearly that they do understand what is just peace and what is genuine democracy. And the US imperialism has also shown the world what fascism and imperialism is all about. There is just no doubt across the world. And as you said very correctly, that the resistance is no more just the axis of resistance, it is now a global resistance to what is coming, what has already come, the fascist rules, the fascist killings. It's, of course, Gaza is the most horrendous example of that, but we also have other parts of the world where this is ongoing. The pictures of people dying as they try to immigrate to safe places to looking for livelihood. They are not looking for a bourgeoisie, livelihood. They are looking for basic, simple livelihood to look after their people. And I think it is very important for us. There are many, many questions in the chat about different roles or different countries who are not very democratic inside, but still hold the pillars of anti-imperialism very strong inside them. And yes, so we, the people of the world, need to work together to resolve issues where people's rights are not being fulfilled and looking for more democratic systems which will bring just and lasting peace to us. And so I thank everybody who has been part of this webinar. And we also thank everybody for being so patient for different kinds of disruptions that were happening. And we will close with that. We hope to have all of you again to further webinars hosted by the International People's Front. And we also hope to work with Professor Arar to work on a statement that would look after the you have to laugh at this madman who's running the United States at the moment. But yes, we look for closer collaboration with all of you. So thank you very much for a very, very vital and invigorating webinar. I will close with that. Thank you again.